Transistor is a game about a girl named Red, her boyfriend who is actually a giant green sword, the ragtag conspiracy theorist trying to take over a city, yes, that one has a parasol, and literal murderous computer programs that can warp reality. There, saved you 6 hours. Do you want to know more? Fine.
Hey, Red. We're not gonna get away with this, are we? Come on, pull. There.
That's how the game starts. Red pulls the sword out of her boyfriend, and now the sword is her boyfriend. You might ask yourself, as a perfectly reasonable human being, how the fuck is her boyfriend a sword now? Especially when he just died by the same sword. The answer seems to be somewhere between magic and technology, mythology, magic. It might as well be all the same at this point. The sword, the titular Transistor, is a huge focus of the game along with Red. These are two of the very few characters that we actually see get any screen time, although there are some other people present in the game, but most of them are through text mention and very peripheral details. There's a big focus on Red and her relationship with the Transistor or sword, whatever you want to call it, and there's also a very big focus on the city and what is happening here, what the history of the city is.
Traverson Hall. The annex building. They're not there anymore. Half the skyline's disappeared. Whatever's after us, it's spreading.
A lot of the story happens in the background, a lot of it is peripheral, and you can miss a lot of it, but we'll get to that later. But if I'm being real honest, if you miss some of the story, it'll be okay. The art and graphics are pretty simple, nothing really cutting edge, nothing that's really pushing the tech or anything like that. But considering the game is about 7 years old, it holds up very well. And a lot of that's due to keeping it simple and using graphics that aren't really reliant on cutting edge technology and are more a product of the quality of the art direction itself. It's all from a top-down perspective with a little bit of superimposed art, especially during dialogue and text and the like. There's some shots where we get some really nice, well-done portrait pieces to highlight the characters. The city and the scenery, all of the buildings, all of the architecture, all of the environments, it's very well done. There's a lot of areas that have a unique flavor, and you can really see the variance between different districts and areas of the city. At the same time, there are some areas that kind of blend in a little bit. I wouldn't say that 100% of the areas that we traverse through have really distinguishable features that offset them from everything else. There are enough areas with their own distinct personality and a completely different feel and flavor than some of the other areas, so that when you go to different districts and different areas of the city, you can feel a definitive difference from where you were at before. As the game progresses and things start to change within the city, that really can present an entirely new look. And by the end of the game, we're working our way through some areas and landscapes that are distinctly and wholly different from all of the areas we've been in before. I would have liked to see some of the areas have a little bit more depth and a little bit more detail that would have just really set them apart from everything else. But I will say that by the time everything comes to a culmination, the final area is actually really radically different and stands far apart from everything else. The lighting and particle effects, all of the different effects that go into the combat of the game, all of the various, light flares and stuff like that are visually engaging and interesting, but nothing that I would really say is mind-blowing. I can't remember any particular battle effects or parts of the attacks and different stuff like that were just enormously stunning, just visually arresting. So in terms of just a overall aesthetic for the battles and stuff like that, it's not really gonna sit there and just blow your socks off. I don't remember there ever being a time where I was like, holy shit, how did that happen? And whether we're talking about stuff that you do or stuff that your enemies do, that's not really a part of it. It's polished, it looks decent, but it's not really anything that's gonna just make you go, wow, that was wild. But I don't think it really needs to be. That's not what the game or the systems are trying to accomplish in the first place. So as far as presentation, visually speaking, it's fine. As far as the gameplay, you do a lot of wandering around the city. You do some sightseeing, for lack of better terms, the different areas that you can interact with, and you'll get, either a little flavor text comes up or there'll be a little monologue coming off of your boyfriend, Transistor.
Looks like I get to put off selection for a while longer. High-rise is dead ahead. Across the canals. Hey there, little guy. You lost?
That's the majority of the exploration in the game boils down to that. Everything else is either directly combat gameplay or is involved with min-maxing abilities and attacks and support systems that go into the combat. Battles are almost entirely tactical and center around planning using the turn feature. The turn feature means that you can press a button, time freezes, and you can plan out a course of attacks from there. You can move into position, you can select a target, you can figure out how to line up multiple targets with a single attack depending on what type of attack it is. All your abilities and programs will determine what types of attacks, what type of interactions, and what types of effects you get during that planning period. It'll be executed, and then you have to wait for a cooldown to pass before you can attack again. During that time, all of your enemies can come after you. You're fair game, kind of defenseless because you can't attack back, and your range of movement is a little bit limited. Your abilities, or programs, are extensive and can be comboed and combined into direct attack abilities, passive supporting effects. You can do everything from buffing your attacks to increasing your move speed between attacks to charming enemies, even setting bombs on the battlefield that you can attack for huge AoE damage. One of the things that I particularly liked is that using programs in various ways, whether they be support abilities, augmenters, or direct attacks, will unlock extra story information about characters, city inhabitants, and the overall plot. This is a great way of marrying your gameplay to your story, and it gives further incentive to experiment with your different gameplay functions within your programs to see how they synergize and also get new little pieces of lore. The music and audio in this game is enormously important. For the music, I literally wrote, "Music is fucking bonkers." That's apparently the sum of my thoughts. There are multiple tracks featuring singer Ashley Barrett. She's performed music for all 4 Supergiant Games: The Bastion, Transistor, Pyre, and Hades. She really knocked it out of the park in this one. On top of the songs being really well made in general and her performance being very good, I think that there's an extra layer of meaning behind this because in the game, Red is a singer. That is who she was. That was what she did before the events of the Transistor. And because of some events in the backstory of the game, she lost her voice, which is of course kind of shitty for a singer. So we have these songs featuring her singing playing throughout the game at various points that is a reminder of what Red has lost. Not only does it set the atmosphere very well, but it also has a poignant reminder of where Red is in her personal journey, having lost her voice and her man as well. Speaking of the sword boyfriend, Transistor is voiced by Logan Cunningham, and he has been the major narrator for every Supergiant's game. His voice is solid gold.
The Camerata. They'd rip this whole town apart. To get us. In high rise. Don't know what came over me out there. It was like... Well, anyway, whatever it was, it's past. Hello, world. You don't look so good. Almost there. Last member of the Camerata. Hey there, little guy. You lost? No? That's my star. Could always handle yourself. Just fine. I love you so much, Red. You know that, right?
Somehow, even though he is recognizable in every Supergiant's game, he has a distinct flavor and character to each game that does not match with the rest. The majority of the narration and a huge chunk of what plot you do get outright in the game comes directly from the Transistor, and Cunningham carries the performance phenomenally. Without Cunningham and his monologue, there would be so much less concrete, solid attachment to the characters, to the events, to the story, to the background going on here. It'd be much much closer to an endless wave of enemy encounters with a little bit of walking around between. Cunningham's monologues are the heart and soul of the game, and the relationship of the Transistor and Red going through the strange events of one of them being mute, one of them being a sword, and the whole world slowly crumbling around them is the core of the narrative driving you forward. We're going to touch on the story. I'm not going to go deep into spoilers. I'm not really going to get into that much detail, but I will be talking about it a little bit, so if you want pretty much a totally blind experience except for the very small details that I've given so far, skip forward to this point. As far as the story goes, it's mostly doled out through Sword Boyfriend's monologues, text files from terminals, and various other text and flavor notes, audio logs, and the like. The events of the game are set into motion by the Camerata. I don't want to tell you how many times I had to look that up to remember. The small coalition unwittingly unleashed the programs in an attempt to wrest control of the city for themselves and to remake it in their image. And the Transistor, your boyfriend, is the key of it all. You could play through the whole game and miss 90% of what's going on, and I'm honestly not convinced that I didn't miss pretty close to that much. The game has a pretty distinctly Dark Souls style of storytelling. Yes, I know I'm going to be crucified in the comments because saying that something is like Dark Souls is about the most lazy comparison you can make, but guess what? Everything is Dark Souls. Get over it. It's a Dark Souls world, and I'm living in it. The plot isn't spoon-fed to you. You have to do some legwork. Unfortunately, it isn't pulled off nearly as well as in Dark Souls, and while the plot is fairly interesting, my socks were not, in fact, blown off. I think the plot is still worth digging into if you're a fan of games that work more with lore and piecing a story together rather than watching each moment unfold blatantly before your eyes, but just don't expect it to be up to the level of some of the greatest in the genre. In the end, the story is about the city, and the story is about the relationship between Red and her boyfriend turned sword. Everything else is accessory to those central pillars. If you're looking for a game with a straightly told, easy to follow story, this is not your game. If you're looking for a straight adrenaline fix with action from start to finish, this is not your game. But that's never really been the type of game that Supergiant Games offered to begin with. Supergiant Games have a well-earned reputation for crafting games that lead with unique gameplay loops, art that is at once simple and lush, and music that single-handedly establishes the vibe and tempo of their games. Transistor doesn't play like or tell its story anything like The Bastion, Hades, or Pyre. But if you're a fan of any of those other titles by Supergiant Games, you owe it to yourself to experience the quality of Transistor and walk a mile in Red's shoes. Just make sure you're ready to do some heavy lifting. I don't even want to know what that sword weighs. Thank you for checking out my review of Transistor. If you enjoy my review, leave a like and comment. Let me know what you thought. Let me know how I can improve it in the future. If you didn't like it so much, leave a thumbs down so I know to do better next time. Subscribe for more content. I'm going to try and have a video of some kind or another up every week to do with game reviews, game discussions, or even just initial impressions. Thank you for checking out my content. Have a good one.